I'm going to go ahead and get started. If you are joining late, don't worry. It's going to be a slow start, but we will be all over it by the end of the time. So I'm Cliff Steinhauer. I am the Director of Information Security and Engagement here at the National Cybersecurity Alliance. And with me today is Perry Carpenter. Perry Carpenter is the Chief Evangelist and Strategy Officer at KnowBe4. Say hi there, Perry.
Hey there. Thanks everybody for joining.
Yeah. So, welcome. This is our first Convene Chats webinar. I'm excited to bring this to you all. We have our twice a year in-person event for training and awareness people called Convene. And what we do at Convene is we talk about the human element in cybersecurity and what we can do to protect our systems and software from attackers using the defenses of our people. So that would be your phishing resistance, your cybersecurity awareness training, and all the things that go into teaching people how to keep themselves safe online, which is what we do more broadly at the National Cybersecurity Alliance. So today we're going to talk about some deepfakes and AI information and things like that. But first, before I do that, I want to talk a little bit more about Convene and what Convene is. So as I mentioned, this is for the human security practitioners. We have our next live event coming up here in Seattle, Washington, my hometown, in August 21st and 22nd. So we would love to see you there with us. We're going to have a packed agenda of speakers from government, from large and small organizations, and there's going to be some really interesting talks on how to keep your people safe and some best practices you can take back to your organizations with you. All right, so that's the end of the plug. I'm going to get over to Perry here in just a second. So Perry is part of KnowBe4, who have been a very strong supporter of the National Cybersecurity Alliance and our Convene event. Perry spoke at our event earlier this year in Clearwater, Florida, and he gave a talk about AI and deepfakes and kind of some of the threats that we're facing today. And all of us are very interested in this topic, Perry. It's something that we're seeing over and over again in the news and media and new tools coming about all the time. So you did a great job at Convene in Clearwater showing us how realistic some of these things can be. Can you kind of give us a little bit of a background on how you started studying this and what we need to be looking at today?
Yeah, so I got into it a little bit before the Chat GPT moment when it comes to generative AI. So I've been playing with generative AI tools back when most of them were available only through API, back when kind of the GTP3 era, prior to November 2022, and was really amazed at what can be done with text even at that time. And it's improved so much more since then. Have been really interested in voice cloning for a few years, and have been cloning my voice for use in things like podcast, so that I don't have to go re-record lines, and that's only been getting better as well. So that time since probably about 2019, 2020, that I've been playing with voice cloning, and really haven't gotten into video deepfakes until maybe the past year, year and a half. And the thing that's continued to strike me when it comes to all the different generative AI stuff is that we keep putting our hope in the wrong place when it comes to how we deal with this moment that we're in. And we have officially hit the crossover moment between what most people can tell is real and fake and what will just go by if it's in a social media feed. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but the primary reason is just that we're not nearly as good at detecting falsehoods as we think we are. So there's a natural mental issue that we have at, we overestimate our ability to detect falsehoods. And then the other thing is that there are a number of things at play when it comes to the way that a piece of fake media, synthetic media, will show up in front of us. One is that it will typically be sprinkled in with a bunch of other things that we've already considered real. And so it's not like a presentation like this where we're already talking about deep fakes, we're talking about synthetic media. And so you see it and your red flags are already up. It's in with what you call the real world. It's sprinkled in, and so the mental frame that you have as you approach that is much more let down. The other thing is that the bad actors out there really know how to continue to disguise the things that we would consider tells right now. So for me, it's been really interesting to see things that have been what we would call bad versions of this over the past few years, but how quickly it's evolving to even where the bad ones are good now. And within the next 6 months, there's going to be a lot of things that virtually anybody around the world can afford between $0 and $20 a month. And it is good enough to pass muster in any weapons grade disinformation program or scam around the world.
Thanks, Perry. Yeah,
Yeah.
your talk in Clearwater was so eye-opening for us. I mean, you showed us where you had gone and created a deep fake virtual version of yourself,
Yeah.
video, audio, everything. And it was really hard to tell, even though, like as you said, we were there listening to your presentation about AI and deepfakes. From what I saw there, yeah, I think you put three pictures or three videos of
Yeah.
yourself next to each other, and it was really hard, to tell. Which brings me to a point. How do I know I'm not talking to the deepfake Perry right
Right.
now?
Yeah, that's a good thing. And people are going to be asking that question more and more, right? One of the things that I've seen, and the thing that I always tell people right now is if I were to give you a list of tells to look for in any piece of synthetic media, I think that for the most part, I'm doing you a disservice because the technology and the tactics are advancing so fast that if I were to, let's say a year ago, people would say, look and see if there's weirdness about somebody's fingers, look at and see if there's something weird about their hair, look at text in the background, see if that's being represented right. That was potentially fine for the time. But we live in a version of reality where even people with the best intentions trying to represent truth airbrush their photos. So there's reasons that hair and skin and all that may not look like true to life. When it comes to text, that's largely been solved by the applications that are out there. So you don't see garbled text near as much anymore. Same thing with fingers, especially if you have a disinformation agent out there that is cherry picking the very best results, you're not going to see those weird things. And so I really hesitate to give somebody here's the 5 things to look for to tell if something's a deep fake, because anybody that means what they're doing and has a little bit of time out there, they don't even have to have good funding. They have to have good instincts and a little bit of time, and they can create anything that would pass even Cliff, you and I, who know enough about this to be slightly dangerous, would pass muster with us as potentially being real. The so the things that I'm seeing people try to gravitate towards now and solving this, like with a potential video deep fake, as you alluded to, that would happen in real time, is they'll try to get the person to move around a little bit, go closer to the camera, go far away, say weird phrases that they wouldn't naturally say. Sometimes they'll play with dimensions and they'll have somebody put their hand in front of them or touch their nose, do things like that because they're trying to just look for glitches around the edges.
Hmm.
And I've seen that used in some of the deep fake conferences. So if you see some of the things where like Sam Altman and everybody were zooming in to speak, they were doing those kinds of liveness tests with that. Again, 6 months from now, does that really matter or not? I don't know. So I, it's an interesting way of looking at it, and people are going to be constantly trying to detect liveness. Um, but we're in an arms race, essentially. And so as soon as you hang your hat on something, you potentially created a false sense of security. And that's what I want to fight against is the false sense of security because as soon as we get that, we're done for.
Right, right. Putting on my security hat for just a second, we
Yeah,
think about verifying identities and how do we know we're talking to who we purport to be talking to. Um, I think it's going to be important as we move forward to come up with protocols and processes as to, just like when you're being asked to transfer money by an accounting team or something like that, you go through verification processes to validate the request. How do we do that when we're talking to somebody, on video? Because so many of us are doing things remotely these days, hardly any B2B company is in person on the meeting. So
right.
I see a future where we go through the beginning of a checklist at the beginning of each Zoom call to say, okay, I need the CFO to, turn left, turn right, jump up and down, like do these kind of video things so we can prove that they're actually a human and who they are, that they are who they say they are without having
Yeah.
enough knowledge about the person to be able to fake it.
Yeah, we are entering that weird where it's going to look like potentially everybody's starting off a meeting with a TikTok dance, maybe type of thing.
Yeah.
The other thing is when you get to people that you know more, you can have code words and things like, shared bit of knowledge. If you think about authentication and authorization methods, when we get to things that we've talked about for generations when it comes to authentication, multi-factor authentication is still possible. Maybe
Mhm.
it's not an app on your phone, but something can still be possible. Something you have with you can still make it possible. Something you are can still make it possible. So I think all of those things in various ways can still come into play because, like in a virtual kidnapping scenario, if you believe that somebody may have cloned your child's voice or your spouse's voice and that person's on the phone purporting to be them, if you have a shared password or a memory or something like that to draw from, then you're already ahead of where the bad actor is. And
Yeah.
yeah, maybe somebody's stressed out, maybe they don't recall that. There's lots of things that can go wrong, but having the process, having talked through the ways that you can start to overcome this is going to put you at a way bigger advantage than if you're not aware that this is possible and it just comes out of nowhere. And that's where this little graph comes in because as humans, we adapt slower than we would like to believe to technology. And when you look at how fast generative AI and technology in general has been advancing over the past several years, especially over the past 2 years with generative AI, it is exponentially faster. And I can show people things right now that were commonplace to me a year ago when it comes to AI, but it's still, some people are seeing it for the first time. They didn't even know that some of that is possible. And so that gives the way to this gap between adaptability and where technology is and the possibility that it unlocks, that somebody that is in the know has this really big exploitation zone that they can march and attack through. And I think that that's really, really important for us to understand, is that we're constantly living in this exploitation zone. And the only way to help the people around us is to start to turn on a flashlight and say, did you even know this was possible? And here's some
Yeah.
of the ways that it can happen. Here's some of the things you can do to potentially be prepared.
Absolutely. I agree with all of that. And I love the multi-factor and the authentication things that you mentioned. It's actually, you've segued it perfectly into this graph too. I look at this graph as human adaptability, but also awareness of what technology is and what it can do these days. I think if you're in the security space right now, we're intrinsically interested in this and we're learning about it. But if you take ourselves out of this space, out of our bubble, I think there are plenty of people out there who have no idea how good this technology has gotten,
Mhm.
what it looks like, what it can do. To even think about having that conversation about having a family code word or something like that. It kind of reminds me of I know Rachel Toback, and she was on 60 Minutes a while ago and talking about having a family password and things like that. If you saw that, that was probably for a lot of people the first time they ever thought about this. And it actually
Yeah.
goes so far beyond that. That was voice, of course, voice over the phone kind of thing. But yeah, I like this chart. I saw it in both your webinar and I'm going to mention something special coming up in just a second. But just to keep us moving along here, um, Perry actually recorded a webinar that was very, very close to the presentation he gave at Convene in Clearwater, which is fantastic. Anybody can go and watch this now, and I highly recommend it. Um, it has a lot of the same video demonstrations, audio demonstrations, and image generation demonstrations that we saw in his talk. And for me personally, watching the talk in person, even though I have seen some of this here and there, I was blown away to see it all presented together. So I thought it was obviously an amazing talk that you gave, Perry. Um, why should somebody watch this, and who should watch this if they are interested in learning about this?
Yeah, so I think that there's some technical depth in this, but it's not too deep. So I think it's accessible to virtually anyone. If you're enthusiastic about technology, you'll really get a kick out of it. If you're into like what is the next wave of deception that's going to be coming, how are people social engineered, that's going to be shown as well. And if you like to be scared, there's some scary stuff that I show at the very end. The thing that I always try to do in these, though, is also point a little bit to the light side. I don't think that the technology is innately evil or bad or anything like that. I think that technology tools, they all mold to the hands of the person that wields them. So if that person has bad intentions, they can do something bad with it. Something that person has good altruistic intentions, they can use that for good. And so in a lot of these, I'll talk about like how do you do voice cloning with good intentions and use that as an asset for your organization? Well, it's because it can like if you're creating a training video, all of a sudden now you can embody a voice that you never had. Maybe you don't have somebody that feels comfortable with the voice that they have. Well, now they can do a really great voiceover, um, putting the inflection that they want, where they want it, the intonation, the pacing, everything else, because there's voice to voice cloning that can happen. Or you can give a voice to somebody that doesn't have a voice through text to speech. There's lots of really, really good reasons for this technology to exist. But there are other people that are out there that are curious or who have really bad intentions that can take and do the same thing with this technology that they would a hammer or a saw or anything else that they could get their hands on and cause potential destruction.
Absolutely. It's a tool, right? And it can be used for good or for evil. And um, the imagery here is a little spooky, but I like that you have hope in there and you've explained it from both sides, how it can be used for good and for evil and what we need to do to be aware and to protect ourselves.
Yeah,
So,
one funny thing
yeah.
about this, though,
Oh,
I don't think I've ever mentioned this publicly. This image on the left, that is actually me. So I uploaded my photo to a program, I think it was Midjourney, and then put in the rest of the prompt that I wanted to generate all the electric artifacts and everything else around that, and that's what came out. So the facial structure, the bone structure, all that that's represented as me. Now you won't be able to unsee it.
that's 100% true. Now I will always see you, and that is pretty cool, actually. I have to try something like that. All right, cool. So, Perry, I was very surprised and honored yesterday when you sent me this information. So Perry has just written a book on this entire subject. It's called Fake. And I love what you did there with the AI and the spelling of fake. So his book is going to be released in October. Perry was gracious enough to share a preview copy with me yesterday, which I got two-thirds of the way through, I think. But it's extremely timely that this is coming out. Um, Again, it builds on the presentation we saw at Convene, the webinar that we just talked about. And now we have an entire guide of how to think about and how to understand all these issues that are going on. And I can't wait to get to the part at the end where I can learn how to protect myself, because so far I've just read all the issues and all the things that are coming. So Perry, please. This is the first public announcement, I think, of
Yeah.
this book. So tell us about it.
Yeah, this is the first time anybody other than maybe three or four other folks have seen the cover. You could go pre-order it on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. They've loaded the cover and the basic information, but all the other information's not yet been filled in on correctly, at least on page count and all that. But it comes out in October to coincide with Cybersecurity Awareness Month. It's really framed around understanding where we are as a society and what the influence that technology can have to enable bad actors to do bad things. We've already talked about that. But it's also, as you mentioned, framing your mind around this the right way to get into what we would call cognitive security, understanding the mental the mental framework you can put in place, the habits and behaviors that you can put in place that will become the protective mechanism. Similar to the discussion we had about having like a family code word. Those things come out of it because we have hit that exploitation zone. And we talk about all the different facets of the exploitation zone throughout. I give a really good grounding about what generative AI is, how it works in real life, what the prompting mechanisms are, how to jailbreak. I give a little bit of that, not going full on, put another tool in somebody's hands, but I talk through all the methodology about how this can and does go wrong. I also color myself as a technology optimist in this, also because I am. Um, and then what I end up in the last third of the book doing is really painting the picture for what cognitive security is. How do we put these practices in place? I talk about what I call the four horsemen of online vulnerability. So things like the emotional tempest or the digital naive, or things like really the cognitive bias around confirmation and so on. So all those are painted in and showing how to dismantle and make each one of those. I'm not going to say ineffective because we still have human minds, but less effective, and really build in the habits and the ability to stop and follow what I call, or not what I call, it's been created before me, but follow what is known as the SIFT framework. So being able to stop, investigate what's going on, find some of the original sources out there or other information, and then trace that back to where it came from or where it very likely comes from. So there's all these different mental processes and frameworks and things that you can use to really fall back on and develop the habits that you need and tools to educate others as well.
Love it. Yeah, I the first time I saw cognitive security was reading through your book yesterday,
Nice.
and I love that term. I think that perfectly embodies what we've been trying to call like training and awareness, human factors and security, or the human element and those types of things. And what we're really doing is we're training people how to think, retraining people how to think when they encounter these things online, including deep fakes or social engineering, phishing, all the things that attackers and bad actors wield against the human element in cybersecurity, right? So I
Yeah.
love that term cognitive security, and I hope I can steal that and use that when I talk
Well,
about the
it's
human
not my
element
term. So
of
yeah,
security.
that's a known term. It really comes from the military industrial complex, but I
Okay.
think I think it makes a lot of sense because psychological warfare has always been part of this.
Yeah.
And you get to countries like Estonia and Sweden and Finland and others who have really had to defend themselves at the level that we have, if not more, against disinformation tactics. And they've got entire programs around this. So we can learn a lot from what's gone on around the world. The other one thing I'll mention is that every chapter starts with a dramatized story that's totally fictitious, but really shows the human level effect of this and the tactics that are going to be explained in the chapter. And then it gets into the more nonfiction pieces of this.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm still waiting to see what happens with one of those stories. I don't know if you're going to close the loop on that or just leave it open
I
for me,
don't close
but
all the loops. I so all the stories in the first seven chapters are detached. They're just kind of showing what is possible out there. And then
mhm.
the last three stories are all connected. And there's one thing in chapter 10 that you may consider if it's the loop that opens in chapter 1, that kind of gets closed in chapter 10, but it's within the regular text rather than the opening story.
Right, right, right. Okay. Well, no spoilers. I'll let everybody
Yeah.
read for themselves. In 30 seconds, what can we do until your book comes out to help learn and protect ourselves? We've got the webinar we can watch. What are some quick points that you would think of to give people today to
Yeah.
think of how to protect themselves?
I mean, you mentioned Rachel. I'll steal a phrase from her: is just be pleasantly paranoid about things. I say be skeptical without being cynical,
Mm,
because we all
hmm
have to engage in the world.
hmm
We get in touch with people that we love over social media, so we can't just become recluses, but we can become engaged rather than just passive in what's going by. And we can also find ways to in the nicest way possible, in a very empathetically engaged way possible, become part of the solution for this. So to point out where things are going wrong. And I talk about in the book, I talk about the right and wrong ways to do that, both from a social engagement perspective, but also where you're not accidentally feeding the algorithm. So when you see a scam, don't comment on the scam. Don't like or dislike or put an angry face by the scam. All that does is throw that in everybody else's feed.
hmm
So there are ways that you can engage, and a lot of it is through reporting through proper channels, maintaining your emotional detachment from things, realizing when somebody's trying to poke you in system one type of thinking, which is very emotional and automatic, and then realize when you're being triggered is the biggest thing. And that goes back to all kinds of scams, all kinds of disinformation, is they're always just trying to trigger an emotional automatic response. And so you want to get out of that as much as possible.
Yeah, one thing I've been thinking about lately is how I feel hearing about certain stories on the news or on social media and how emotionally charged I become. Like I
Yeah.
listened to the news this morning, I was like, man, this has really got me going for some reason today. And it's intentional, right? Like that's how
Yeah.
they get us to listen. So thank you so much, Perry. I just want to quickly wrap this up because I know we're approaching time on the webinar. So, a couple of key takeaways that you already got sort of hinted at, but be skeptical of these deepfakes and how you're feeling online. Being open to new information and changing your mind is a big one, and that's something that Perry talks about extensively in his book. Questioning motives of what you're seeing. When in doubt, phone a friend, boss, colleague, relative. Show it to somebody else. Don't keep it to yourself. And of course, read Perry's book, watch his webinar, come join us in Seattle where we can all talk about this for 2 days with many of your peers. It's a great event, and we look forward to seeing many of you there, hopefully. You can pre-order Perry's book on Amazon, Barnes& and Noble, other online book outlets, and join us here in Seattle. We would love to have you. We will have information on our website going out about this, and thank you so much, Perry. I really, really appreciate you joining us today. And I think this has been a wonderful chat. I could go on and on and on, but I think in the interest of time, we'll wrap it up. And let me see if we have any quick questions that we could answer. Um, Maybe Lucas can help me see those. Let's see here if we have any. All right, we have one good question here. I'll go ahead and read that from Jeffrey. How critical steps should IT and security teams approach with tackling deepfakes and AI abuse? So I think his question is what should IT and security teams be talking about right now, or what's the best
Yeah.
method that they could use to start to help their people?
So I think the first one is if you're talking about how to deal with generative AI in your organization, the first step is always have a policy for what is permissible to use within your organization, but also what to have, what the process and policy is for when somebody has a concern about maybe something that they've come up against. So I would definitely do that, because once you start to put the policy in place, that becomes the gold standard for how you react or how you engage. And it also gives you the ability to start to put an education program in place around that too. So think about all the different policy elements of that, both from the dictate how to use, but also the protective mechanisms that you want to put an education program in place, talk about the emotional impacts of this, and really start to empower people with the mental frameworks on how to deal with it. The caveat that I would say as technologists, we want to find something to run a deep fake through and say, is this real or not? And based on the research that I've done, the people that I've talked to, is that the arms race makes those pieces of technology not as effective as we would hope that they are. It's about a coin toss with most of them. Your mileage may vary. A lot of it is based on the sophistication of the bad actor and the specific deep fake. And stupid ways of getting around controls always work. You know, the same tactics that a teenager uses to not have the person that they've just taken a screenshot on Snapchat of their post is going to be effective in this world, right? You know, Snapchat will notify somebody if they somebody takes a screenshot of their post or records a screen grab of that. Um, you know, the kids realize that all you have to have is another phone and a friend, and then you can take a picture of that screen. Same thing happens for digital watermarking, whether that's in the metadata, whether that's in other ways like the frame rates and all that. All that can be manipulated and bypassed. Super stupid, non-technical measures.
Yeah, yeah. So awareness is a big part of it, and training people what to look for and what context to put it into as well. So
Yeah.
awesome. Perfect. Well, I think we have everything we need on this first Convene Chats webinar. Thank you again, Perry, for joining me. And thank you everyone on the line who listened along. You can reach us at StaySafeOnline.org, and we'll send a follow-up email to this recording so that you can share it with your friends. Thank you so much, Perry. I really appreciate you, and we will talk to you again later.
Thanks. It was an honor to be on the first one.
Thanks. Bye.